During the pandemic, when everybody was getting all the stimulus money and life was great, people were essentially spending money that they didn't have because they were getting all this free money that they never had before, and decided to do a lot of spending that they normally wouldn't do. Otherwise, you could call it YOLO spending, meaning YOLO means you only live once. FOMO means fear of missing out. So there's all these terms about how people spend their money and the different psychologies of people's thinking when it comes to money. And YOLO is one of those terms that especially came up during the pandemic because you only live once was very close to home for a lot of people during the pandemic that lost loved ones and saw people pass away at an unexpected time. Even just that alone can fuel some people to spend money they don't have because it makes you realize that your time on this planet is finite and who cares about the money? I'm alive today. That's kind of the mentality that some people have. But now that all that is over with and we're back to real life and this whole thing ended up not being nearly as serious as they claimed that it was, reality is starting to set back in. And what's happening is people are in serious trouble, guys, because especially people that thought that that sort of behavior could last forever and kind of picked up bad spending habits during the pandemic that they haven't been able to drop, those people are the ones who are in the biggest trouble right now. But basically, consumer spending across the board is falling back to earth. You know, last week we talked about the Chicago Business Barometer, lowest reading since the beginning of the pandemic as well. You know, things are not looking good. There's a lot of recessionary indicators flashing red out there. But spending is so huge because it makes up 70 to 80% of GDP, depending on which data source you look at. But it is the lion's share of the economy. Everything that you and I buy on a regular basis makes this economy go round. It's where most of our GDP even comes from. Now, the GDP is fixed and rigged a little bit because it also includes government spending. You know, every time there's a war like there is right now and they give money away for that, that counts as GDP. Every time you have an illegal immigrant come in and services are rendered to them that are given by the government, that counts as GDP. So those things are being artificially juiced right now, as we know, due to the current situation with those problems. But companies have been picking up on how much spending is coming down when you're starting to see things that used to be affordable actually starting to, lower prices once again, just to be able to get people back in the door. Guys, I've made I don't know how many videos now about fast food restaurants that are doing this. You also have big retailers like Walmart and Target. They're slashing prices on things to get people back in the store right now. Everybody was buying all this expensive coffee for the longest time at places like Starbucks. Their sales have slowed down. In fact, their earnings report came in recently well below expectations. People are wisening up. They're saying, you know what, I can't really spend money on a $5 coffee right now when I have all these bills to pay.
Here we have a house for sale for $4.49 million, but they started off asking $5 million back in February this year. So over $500,000 price cut, still no takers. But at least the one thing that's refreshing here is it's not a flip. They've actually owned this house for a very long time, and we know that from their property tax bill, which is still at only $7,500 a year, which they bought this house like 40 years ago. And it's just kind of refreshing to see a house that someone has actually lived in and called their home, which seems to be so rare today.
Plus, there's another factor to this. During the pandemic, what we also had was employers basically begging people to work for them and offering higher salaries and a lot of remote work opportunities and things like that. And now that dynamic is reversing too, which also influences consumer spending. And the reason why is because as the job market continues to tighten up little by little and less jobs are available out there, and more people are starting to see their neighbor get laid off or somebody they know get laid off. Now that we've seen so many companies close their doors, file for bankruptcy, everything. So when people see that, it makes them more concerned about spending money they don't have because they realize they could be the next one to lose their job. They realize even if they do lose their job, it's not going to be as easy to get another one again. It changes the game. You see a lot of companies calling people back into the office where they promised, oh, this is going to be a remote work opportunity forever. But now that employers gain more leverage, they can change the game. And that's what they're doing. But here's what people are still spending money on. People are still spending money on concert tickets. They're still spending money on plane tickets, but they're cutting back on everything else. You know, people are still spending money on having fun, essentially, and kind of knocking out the rest. Anything that's not essential, they're just getting rid of right now, because everybody needs to have a little fun, guys. I understand that there's nothing wrong with that as long as you can afford to have that fun. But the problem is, some people just take it too far. When you get used to taking it too far and you get used to a certain lifestyle and you try to continue to do it when you don't have the money, that's where people get into trouble.
We have another house for sale at $1.67 million, and when you see a house with a rap sheet like this, think of it like dating, guys. Think of it like she's been with one too many guys for me to step into this one. That's probably going to be the same sort of feeling you want to have with a house with a history like this. It's basically a rap sheet, and it's not good. And guess what? They're in trouble. They're not paying their property taxes. As of 2022, they owe $12,000 in back taxes, and they thought they were going to be smart, flip this house. They bought it back in 2022 for $1.2 million. Now asking an extra $400,000, and it's not selling. Surprise, surprise. So a lot of flippers right now are not doing too good, and they're falling behind on their bills.
And one thing I think a lot of people don't realize about this economy is how we basically spent our way out of a recession, guys, and that was because of all the artificial stimulus given by the federal government during the pandemic. You know, they printed over $6 trillion that they helicoptered out to the economy within just like a 2-year window, and that prevented the recession that we would have had, or already sort of did have. They count a small recession. If you look in early 2020 on their map, it'll show you that we had a small recession during this time until all that money started reaching households. But that recession would have lasted and probably been pretty bad if we didn't do the stimulus, which is why everybody says, oh, it was a great thing we did this. You know, now we avoided the recession and now we're going to have this soft landing. But that's not the case, because now the reality is starting to set back in. Now that the spending is starting to slow down significantly and companies are noticing it, it's going to start causing more companies to continue with layoffs. And you're going to see more people lose jobs. You're going to see more people not be able to pay the bills. And it has a snowball effect like that throughout the rest of the economy. And so what they really did is they just delayed the recession that we were going to have in 2020, and now it's probably going to come, you know, sometime after the election. That's what most people think. Since we clearly know that the lion's share of the GDP is made up solely of consumer spending, just us out there spending money, right? Well, then you know that the government's going to want to continue that for as long as possible, okay? But now that people are running out of money, how is that going to continue? Well, the only way it can continue, at least if the government has anything to do with it, is more stimulus, okay? But the thing is, they can't really afford to just helicopter out another $6 trillion and come in with another massive rescue package when we get in trouble this time, because inflation is already too high. People are already struggling to pay the bills right now. Imagine how bad it would be if they give us round 2 of that. But I do think when things really start turning bad, that they will try to do something to save the economy. I don't know what, I don't know to which extent, and how much stimulus they're willing to pump into it, but I'd be willing to bet it's probably not going to be as much as you think, because they just can't, guys. It's just going to continue to make things worse. But if they do, then we know for a fact then you're going to be seeing inflation go back into probably double-digit territory from there. And the real problem with where things are at right now is there's really no indication that any of this is going to change anytime soon. The rate cuts that were promised for the year have been completely missing. The reduction of inflation and the cost of living coming back down to normal is never going to happen. Maybe they'll bring inflation back down to 2% eventually, but it doesn't matter, because by then all the damage is already done. And if they try to stimulate things even further, well, up goes inflation once again. And it's so funny because everybody just keeps hanging on the Fed meetings, you know, the Fed meetings. There's the next one's coming up here pretty soon here in June. and everybody's wondering, is there going to be a rate cut? Is there even going to be an announcement of when rate cuts will come? Well, if you just look at the last 6 or 7 meetings, there's been no rate cuts, and there's also been no indication of a rate cut. And if you saw my video yesterday talking about the economy here in Miami, how our inflation is running hotter than most other areas of the country due to our booming economy here, a rate cut here can have devastating effects on our economy in terms of the cost of living and inflation going even higher, guys. So there's a lot of consequences with the Fed's actions, and it's going to be interesting to see what kind of decisions they're going to make, because usually it's the wrong one. So one thing's for sure is I'm going to be here to report on it and criticize it. But here's another sign that this economy is slowing down, okay? The job openings in April fell more than expected. You know, what's the common theme that you guys are seeing here? There's 2 common themes. One is that a lot of the economic data coming in is all just as bad, if not worse than it was during the GFC. That's one common theme with a lot of the data we see today. But the other one is all these predictions of where inflation is supposed to be, where corporate earnings are supposed to be, where the jobs numbers are supposed to be, are all coming in below expectations, which means that everybody thinks things are better than they really are. So right now the job openings fell to the lowest level that we've seen in more than 3 years, which was when? The start of the pandemic. So how is that a sign that things are good, guys? Right when the pandemic happened, you saw massive amounts of layoffs. There was so many people that lost their job, which was one of the reasons that the government came out with the big rescue package, because nobody was sure when anybody was going to go back to work. Now, even though it was a mistake to shut down all these businesses and make everybody not go to work to begin with, that's a decision they made nonetheless, so they came in to rescue everybody from that decision. But think about that for a minute. The jobs numbers are just as bad as they were then during the start of the pandemic, when people were losing jobs left and right. So how does that indicate things are going well right now? How does it mean things are strong? I mean, every argument that people have sent my way is completely busted up by all of these numbers. And I don't care, guys. You can argue in the comments till you're blue in the face about this. You're not going to change my mind, at least. Maybe you'll change someone else's mind, but I'm calling it as I see it. You can try to twist it into any which way you want, but the reality is things are slowing down and are getting bad. And it's probably just going to get worse. So the job openings, which is a measure of labor demand, were down 296,000, okay, in April. Now the number is at 8.059 million as of the last day of April, which is the lowest that we've seen since February of 2021. One thing I keep hearing from a lot of people, and I haven't verified this myself, but I've heard it from you guys in the comments, and I've heard it from other YouTube channels, is that the labor market is fake right now. You know, these 8 million jobs that are out there, a lot of them are just for show. A lot of people have said there's so many job openings for all these companies that are not real. They're not actually hiring. They're just looking like they're hiring. But if you go to apply for the job, they have no real intention of ever actually hiring someone for the position. So my question is, how many of those 8 million jobs are even real? You know, that's something that you got to start questioning, guys. Yesterday, I talked to you about how they revised down the median sales price of brand new single family homes. And this is the US Census Bureau data by 25%, guys. So the homes were actually 25% less expensive than initially thought during the pandemic. So all this mania that we saw wasn't nearly as crazy as they made it look, and that influenced home prices across the country. And now we're seeing the jobs numbers come out at these lower levels, and there's 8 million listings out there, but a bunch of people are saying that a lot of these listings aren't even real. So it makes you question, well, if there is 8 million jobs, how many of them are real jobs that are really being hired for, and what percentage of those jobs are actually good enough jobs where you can just work one job and get enough income and full-time benefits that you need to just work one job and take care of your family? Because a lot of people are working 2 jobs right now. You know, they also revised down the March data to less jobs than they initially thought. And also those jobs numbers didn't hit the expectations that economists had either. So this recurring theme of downward revisions, real data hitting lower than expectations. These are all not signs of a strong economy. And right now the Fed is saying that only a meaningful weakening of the labor market could trigger a rate cut sooner than what they've been saying. So unless unemployment really starts spiking, then there's probably not going to be a rate cut. So they're kind of waiting for that, guys. And I'm waiting for it too. I'm sitting here on the sidelines, just sitting here watching, talking to you guys every week, and waiting to see if they're going to cut prematurely or if they're actually going to wait till things really start getting bad and then cut, like they always do. So we'll see. Oh, and here's another sign of the great booming economy is the fact that home sellers across the country are starting to lower prices of their homes for sale. Because if things were so great, they would be able to just continue raising the price, right? They wouldn't be cutting prices. But 6.4% of sellers recently lowered their price at the last week of May. This is the highest level of price cuts that we saw since November of 2022, which, you know, that was the time when we saw a lot of price cuts, because think about it, 2022 was like the craziest year we've ever had in real estate history in terms of buying and selling activity, as well as price appreciation, everything. And then when things finally started settling down and the interest rates started ticking up at the end of the year, then you saw buyer activity start to plummet. So people had to start cutting prices if they wanted to sell the properties. So now we're basically in that same situation all over again, except inventory's on the rise. In fact, there's inventory's on the rise almost everywhere across the country right now, which I will do a video on that later in the week. So right now the typical asking price of a home got dropped by about $3,000 down to about $417,000 according to Redfin. And here's the other interesting thing. This is the first time that we've seen a deceleration in home prices in the last 6 months, and this is during a time when the housing market's supposed to be on fire, guys. It is now June, okay? April, May, June, July, those 4 months are like the hottest months of the housing market, and we're already seeing price cuts at the beginning of June. What does that tell you? Does that tell you the economy is strong? Does that tell you a lot of people have money to go out and buy these houses? No. Also, the median days on the market is starting to rise according to Redfin, more than it did a year ago. But one really concerning thing for the real estate market is that their home buying index fell 12% on a year-over-year basis and was down 7% from just 1 month ago, guys. So actually the opposite is happening of what we normally see every single year, where the demand usually shoots up through the roof this time of year for real estate. It is actually falling. This is something we haven't really seen before. And you can say whatever you want about me and my channel or whatever, but I'm paying attention to the details here, and also as somebody who worked real estate full-time for a solid 13 years here, I've never seen anything like that. So when you see a trend that's abnormal, it should make you pause and think about it for a minute. We've seen the pending home sales fall to the lowest level since the beginning of the pandemic recently. You know, here's the funny thing, guys. They talked to one of the Redfin real estate agents. They always do this in the Redfin articles. And they asked, you know, what's kind of driving a lot of their clients' purchases right now. And this is what she said. She said that people who are buying right now are typically doing so because they're having a baby or looking for a more family-friendly home. So this is something I never understood about the buyer mentality. Like, just because you're having a baby, you need to buy a house. Like, this is just so crazy. I mean, as long as you can feed and clothe your baby and put a roof over its head, I don't know why it matters whether or not you own the house or you rent the house. You know, but there's so much emphasis on this. It's kind of like a social stereotype, I guess you could say, almost. Like, if you have a kid, then you need to own your own house. It's kind of like one of those rites of passages, this unspoken rule of society, that people put this crazy pressure on themselves, which is unnecessary. I mean, when I was a kid, we moved. You know, my parents did buy a house. They fell into that trap too. They bought a house, and then when my brother was born, they bought another house, and we moved into that house, and that was the house I grew up in until I left Illinois at 20 years old. But as a kid, I was always kind of eager to move to a new place and try something different. I always hoped that my parents would move, but they never did. I think moving can be fun for kids as long as it's not all the time. You know, if you're in the military family and you're moving every year, that can kind of be crappy for kids because you're constantly moving schools, trying to, make new friends and all of that. But if you move every 5, 6, 7 years, then that might be fun as a kid. Another thing I'm seeing happening lately, which I don't know is necessarily a sign of a bad economy, but it definitely isn't a sign things are good, and it's the uptick in scams, okay? And some of them are getting very good and very believable, and they target people. And I have a personal experience to share with you on this because, as a lot of you know, I play guitar. You guys have seen my guitars in my room and some of the old bedroom videos I've done here and there. The other day, when I was on Instagram, this ad popped up because a lot of people know, including me, that Sam Ash, the music store, is going out of business after almost 100 years in business, something crazy like that. And it looked legit. It looked like it was from Sam Ash. Take a look at this. It shows all these guitars on sale. We're talking like $130 for a Gibson Les Paul, guys. And that was the red flag for me. That's how I knew it was too good to be true, because no retailer is ever going to sell, a $2,000 guitar for $130. And so instead of, going on this website to just buy it, I went to the Sam Ash website, and lo and behold, what do you know? Right at the top, it tells you, beware of fraudulent websites, okay? All websites claiming to be related to Sam Ash other than samash.com are fraudulent. Most are operated outside the US and will take your money but are unable to fulfill your order. We are not responsible for orders placed on them, okay? So as the economy continues to get worse, you're probably going to see more scams like this, because you see a lot of companies go out of business and have to have big liquidation sales like this one, right? And if you're none the wiser and you don't double check where you're shopping and you see a good deal like this, something that looks to be a good deal, you can get scammed, guys. They'll take your money. Now, $130 isn't too bad. You'll lose some money. Nonetheless, you don't want to lose it. Nobody wants to lose $130. But they could have made this scam even more believable if the sale prices on these guitars were more believable, right? Like if it was $2,000, the original price for the guitar, and say it was like half off, $1,000, or even $1,200 for the guitar, I would have bought one. Not saying from this website, but if it was a real deal, I would have bought it. Okay, because you don't never see deals like that come up, ever. But as the economy continues to worsen, that's the funny thing. You could actually see real deals like this out there come up as businesses need to liquidate and as they fall on hard financial times, but you have to make sure you're checking to see if the deal you're getting is legitimate or not, like I did. Like if I didn't go to Sam Ash's website to see this and determine that it was a scam, then I might have fallen for it. But I'm smarter than that, and I know that there's a lot of scams, and every time you think something's too good to be true, it probably is. So you just gotta watch out for stuff, guys. A lot of people spend time scrolling on Facebook and Instagram, whatever, and you see a lot of these ads pop up that look believable. So be careful. And they're gonna target you in particular. Like they know I play guitar, they know I like guitar stuff, I watch guitar stuff on there. They targeted me for that, something appealing to me. Maybe they're gonna target you for gardening stuff or whatever, something that you normally look at. And they get people. They only have to get a few hundred people to make this scam more than worthwhile for them. So yeah, after thinking about that for a minute, I think that is probably a sign of a bad economy, that people are trying to scam more and more people out of money because that's the only way they can make any money. So this is my last video in Miami, guys. I will be back here in November. That's right, November. It's gonna be the longest time I've ever been away from Miami, and I'm really excited to share all the new spots and places I'll be with you guys. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. You don't want to miss those upcoming videos. And if you don't want to wait for my next one to come out, check out this video on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.